So I think for the longest time that I've run this organization, I wanted to actually meet like-minded marketers from the industry and sit down and have a chat. I'm so glad I'm finally getting around to doing it, and I have very happy and glad that Deepan, you could make it as the first sort of person that I'm doing this with. Hopefully, I'll get to do a lot more. But thanks a lot for making time. I know it's a busy day for you. You had a bunch of things planned, but you're able to move it around. And I know it's not an easy commute from Sarjapur to Indiranagar.
No. It was relatively easier today.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think the world of marketing sort of knows you, as this person who's been in performance field for a while. Obviously, I think you're famous now due to your involvement with Growth School. But for those who don't know this, if we could quickly have your origin story, your background and how you've sort of come into this line of work. We can maybe start from there.
So I come from a very humble background. Grew up in a small town. Did my engineering like most of the people from South would do. I don't even remember a single word in terms of the 4 years that I did engineering. Ended up with an engineering job, telecom engineering job. But I knew that it wasn't meant for me. Right? I was just hating it, going to work every day. And I was telling myself, is this what you want to do for the rest of your life? Right? Then I took a call to resign from that first job that I had as an engineer. Took up a post-graduation program. Did not work out again because, a semester in, I realized this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. Right? And I expected something out of it. But looks like I'm going back to my engineering days where I'm not really liking what I'm learning from it.
Right.
So dropped out from post-graduation again.
Right.
And I asked myself, hey, what is that you really want to do in your life, right? And this was also a time where I had to really take care of my family. Right? Dad had suffered a lot of losses, and there was this crunch time. You had that final 6 months before you figure out what the hell do you want to do with your life. So that's when I tried a variety of things. Of course, you've read in many places that, hey, you have to find your passion and stuff like that. Yeah. Theoretically, it makes a lot of sense. Practically, it's difficult. Right? But I told myself, okay, unless you try different things, you never know what is going to work for you.
Right.
What has worked for your neighbor, what has worked for your relative, cousin, your friend is not going to work for you. So I tried a variety of different things. I was in stockbroking for some time.
Oh.
I was on the road doing sales for a telecom company. Right, I was in a banking sector for some time. Started a BPO with a friend. Did all of this crazy stuff. This was in Hyderabad, and that's when I stumbled across this digital marketing certification program.
What timeline was this? Like what years?
This was around 2012.
Okay.
Yeah, just 2009-10 was my engineering. 2012, I had just the final 6 months, like I told you, right, and time was running out, and I had very little money left. I think I had 3,000 rupees left in for my survival.
Right.
And I took up this certification program from a company called EdTech. I'm still very thankful to them.
Right.
They gave me this digital marketing certification program of 500 rupees. And that was a game-changing moment. I really fell in love with the subject. I mean, I do not know how to express it, but it didn't feel like I'm learning something new.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like me watching a YouTube video, right, for entertainment. And that's when I knew, okay, here is something that I can do.
Right.
Which finally fascinating me. Got my first job at a boutique agency in Bangalore as a fresher, and that's how the career began.
So where do you grow up actually?
I grew up in a place called Palani.
Okay, right.
It's a small town near Kodaikanal in Tamil Nadu.
Right.
That's where I did till my engineering. Then for my post-graduation, I moved to Hyderabad. Hyderabad was my life-defining kind of a moment, where the city taught me a lot.
Right.
And then Bangalore is the city that fed me.
Yeah, because I'm assuming growing up in your hometown, it's still a tier 3 town.
It is.
So I'm assuming digital advancements or just adoption to tech, etc. back in those days was almost non-existent,
right?
It
was practically non-existent. We were using dial-up modems for our internet, right? Even up to 2008, 2009, almost the end of engineering, we were still using dial-up internet. And the use case for me, at least with the internet, was to download games, and play. That's it.
Movies.
Movies. Even movies, streaming and all did not exist back then because of slower internet.
Torrents were the way.
So we used to go to torrent and download cheat codes of games, share the games with friends and play.
Right. We've all been there.
Yeah.
So I think, so I'm assuming then moving to a city like Hyderabad, and then that exposure sort of obviously added a lot of value.
Absolutely.
Right. And were you someone who's academically inclined growing up? Was that something
I was always an academically proficient student. except for my engineering day. I just don't know what happened to me. I hated myself during my engineering days. In fact, I flunked on a couple of subjects for the first time. My mom was very sad because since the time I was a kid, she has always seen me as this academically proficient,
Right.
state rank holder kind of a
Right.
kid, and flunking on some engineering subjects. So that 4 years, excluding that 4 years, I've always been an academically proficient student.
Right. And also, did you like have any extracurricular interest? Was that something that you sort of carried along in those student days?
Yeah, I mean, I always used to play games, pick up a sport here or there. You know, growing up, cricket was a favorite sport. Then I found my love for badminton, but badminton used to be expensive. And what I mean by expensive is I couldn't afford a racket at some point.
Right.
Right. So badminton, cricket, and mostly hanging around with friends in a
Right.
room, traveling. Regular hobbies that a student would typically
Right.
would say. I didn't have anything called passion at that time.
Right.
Maybe I couldn't afford a passion at that time.
Got it. And I'm assuming, and badminton's definitely blown up since. Like it's at a very different level now
Yes,
in
it
terms
has.
of.
Now it is everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
You have access. You have the
Yeah.
best of the equipment.
Back in the day, I think you had to play in open fields, subject to
Open
wind.
field, exactly. The open field, and there used to be this uncle club who will always take up the courts.
Yeah,
Okay.
of course.
And you never, you have to wait for them to leave, and then you have to use this featherless.
Yeah. The plastic ones, right?
Plastic ones that has lost its shape.
Yeah.
Because it's expensive, and all your friends, they're
Right.
all taking our 5 rupee, 10 rupee pocket
Right.
money. So
Right.
that's how it was. And it's still fun.
Right.
Fond memories.
So the reason I ask is because I feel as a marketer not sometimes, all the time, I think diversity is very important because you just need to taste and feel multiple things
Absolutely.
to be able to know, what's the right and the wrong.
Yeah.
And there's no other way of sort of learning other than actually tasting and sometimes bleeding.
I completely
Yeah,
agree with
we've discussed this in the past as well, in our offline chats. Be it hiring, be it in terms of figuring out a strategy for campaign, you need to, as a marketer, try and test. And I think the ones who succeed often have done that in their life too. Tried different things, different fields, and often I've seen a pattern with most people who come into the agency world who have tried something somewhere. It's probably not worked out, and then they've come here, and that wealth of experience in trying and failing has actually molded them and made them perfect for the
Agency
kind
world.
of agency world,
Yeah.
right? Because it's just chaos every day.
Yeah.
So I think you need some kind of that. I call it the adversity quotient.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting saying. In
Yeah.
fact, and I strongly believe in that. The more of the general knowledge that you have, the more of the worldview that you have, you can actually be a better marketer.
Yeah, indeed.
It feeds into everything that you do. It's not always about tools and techniques and stuff like that. It's common sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I keep getting asked is if I would teach, digital marketing in general. And I've always stayed away from it. Maybe because as a student, I wasn't academically inclined at all. I mean, I wasn't dumb. I just didn't, find value in sitting in class, memorizing, putting it back out there onto a sheet of paper. But I did well. I always, scrambled through, and on an average, I would do first class. So I've always found it hard, but I think some people find it very natural. I find it easy to teach things unstructured way, wherein it's just on experience or on things. Like I would put people together in the room like this and say, hey, let's shoot. Whether they have experience or no, I would be like, doesn't matter, we'll figure it out. And I've been one of those people who learns through experience and through sometimes, like I say, by bleeding. As long as you don't bleed out, it's fine, I guess. But then I think I've had a lot of people take up a course that you sort of teach, and I think modern day education in some ways is somehow outdated. It's not keeping up with where the market needs to go. And you're someone who's sort of in the middle of it, right? Who's sort of has this now, who's known as this key face in the growth school courses. So how's that experience been? Why do you think that there's so many EdTech companies now solving for that? What's changed in the market?
I mean, irrespective of the number of EdTech companies out there, including growth school, I think the problem of high quality education at affordable prices is not solved yet, right? And if you see any EdTech company, when they all start with a good intention. I mean, I don't want to name companies. They all start with good intention. The founders generally come up with good products that sell really well, right? And then there are a couple of really close friends of theirs or people they trust. They come up with a couple of good products. But when they want to expand horizontally, getting into different categories, the quality goes down, right? My experience, at least, I wouldn't have probably been teaching if not for growth school. At growth school, kind of led that platform for me. Okay, here is a platform where industry practitioners can come and teach people who are coming up in the industry, right? Instead of, let's say, a very traditional model of education, wherein you have a bunch of slides, you keep talking about definition, quote some case studies of some exterior brands, right? It's not that model, right? It's very clearly things that you do as a practitioner, and you are going to teach it to other practitioners who want to become you, right? And that is the core idea behind Growth School, and that worked out really well for me. And during COVID, I had a lot of time. Suddenly I realized I had shit ton of time with myself, and now the time that I've been spending on the road on really stupid meetings face to face, all of that is cut, and I realized that I have like extra 8-9 hours with me. What do I do with it? And then this thing happened, and Growth School was making a lot of noise, and Vaibhav was a friend of mine, and he asked me to do it, and I just did once as a pilot to see if it is really going to work for me, and the reception was amazing, right? And then I think I've done it since 30-40 times now. It has become a habit now. But the beauty about this thing is it's not a slide-based, definition-based coaching. Rather, things that I do in my life for my own brand is what I teach people. So it's like practitioners coaching what they are doing in their day-to-day. People who are actually trying to learn that practice. It's been working very well.
And what's the total number of students that have sort of, I can call it students, I guess, who have, come through the course?
So there are two things that we do. One is a live workshop. One is a detailed 8-week program. The live workshop, I think, is taken by roughly about 25,000 people. And the detailed 8-week program is, it's called a mentorship program, wherein we mentor people very closely, working with them, their career. That's been taken by some 2,000.
It's a very interesting thing because, one of the things about the advertising industry in general is it's a very guarded, caged industry, right? You can't learn unless you're on the job. That's how things were. And if you look at advertising, it's one of the oldest professions. But for some strange reason, the knowledge and that, say, techniques, methods, even at a very fundamental basic level, it's just been very guarded, caged inside an organization. You've worked in agencies for a while, right? Predominantly for a very long period of time. Why do you think that's the case? And now I think if you look at the trend today, I think it's the new digital agencies and new age marketers who are sort of breaking away from it. If you look at the traditional organizations, they're pretty much still there. You can find a handful of people with experience in what they call a mainline network agency stepping out and trying to create courses or turning into, say, teachers of any form. But why do you think that's been the case before to now?
Got it. So I'll tell you something. Not everybody can practice. Everybody who's an expert can teach. On the other side, people who can teach is not necessarily an expert in. It's very rare to find
the balance,
the combination. Like, just a while ago we were saying that, hey, I do it in a very unstructured way. That's how most of the experts in the industries have always done it. Hey, let's get together, let's brainstorm, solve this problem. Instead of doing it in a structured way, because they don't come from that academic background. On the other side, there are academicians who just read things and they teach it to people with no practical experience at all. Firstly, to find these professionals are very difficult. People who are really good at their work and people who can really communicate that very well to people. Even if you get these people, and you need a platform. A platform that can consistently incentivize these people, because of course they have a day job. Right? And then, you can of course come forward and do a webinar of sort, free webinar, a free YouTube video you want to join. And then you have 15-20 people joining. There is not a lot of incentive for this particular expert to continue doing this. Earlier, if you remember, all of these experts go to the events. You have to pay this 10,000, 15,000 for an event and then go listen to them. And that is also very unstructured. It's panel discussion. Sometimes it's one keynote speech. There's nothing that you could learn from these people, right?
It's very mass.
So I would say that first is the lack of professionals who can actually do both. Then a lack of a platform that can incentivize these practitioners to continuously and consistently do that.
Right. Very interesting. Because I've always wondered this, because it's just so much knowledge. Because when you interact with people from other organizations, you realize that every organization has a unique DNA and the way they do things. And then that creates the marketer in itself.
Absolutely. And showing up in front of camera is not easy.
Yeah, it's not at all. I know. I think we've in the past done these videos internally when you win an award, when you win something, when you do something notable, and a lot of them really struggle with it.
Absolutely.
They overthink, overcomplicate, and then you need like more than 10-15 takes to get that 2 sentences right. So yeah, I think it's very true. But I think it's good to see that change now, to be very honest, because as someone who's self-taught, I actually, like much like yourself, I learned off YouTube videos, and I think my inclination went more towards social and content and the creative side than the data side. While I think social is a good intersection between the two. But I think what I've realized in the last few years is that you can't just be what they typically call a sort of straight line, or you have to be a T-shaped marketer. Let's call it that, right? You have to have a specialization, but you got to know other sides as well. And I think industry is forcing the new marketers to be more that way, because gone are the days where creative and media sat independently in two different sides. While it's still practiced in certain, in say certain brands and certain say organizations still sort of look at it that way, but I think that's changing rapidly too, right? So being a performance marketer alone is not enough, right?
Yes,
I think there is a good mix of that creative understanding also that needs to come.
In fact, creative is everything in performance marketing.
Right.
Many people think
very
that
strange,
it's just
right?
about running ads, but creative is everything.
Yeah, tell me about this. Like I've been in so many conversations in rooms and where people just don't, because most of them who take these kind of decisions are actually not practitioners, right? So they do headline readings and then they're listening to somebody else. It's all theoretical. So they think that it's not even a factor in performance marketing. Whereas I think, especially in the last 2 years since the changes in the iOS models, etc., I think now it's just a different realm altogether.
It is. I mean, you can't do without creatives.
Yeah.
And gone are the days where if you are capable of setting up campaigns, if you're monitoring the campaign, you're shutting down, scaling a few campaigns, everything that you do within the dashboard, it's kind of automated these days.
Right.
There is something called Google Performance Max. You don't have to do anything. There is something called Google UAC. You don't have to do anything, right? Even creatives, it makes creatives for you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say creative, but the visuals,
right?
The machine makes that for you. So it's not a skill anymore. So unless you are that marketer who can actually connect the dot, you can connect creative with media, with data, you are going to be in a difficult position. Right. Just by running ads, it's not going to be, you'll not be able to survive with that skill.
So, tell me about your first job, because I think you started in Ripple Links.
Yes.
Which today is, I think, an influencer agency.
It is an influencer.
Back then, was it as an influencer or
it
something?
It was a boutique social media agency.
Right. Got it.
Right. At that time, if you could manage a page,
you were a social
publish
media.
a few updates, right? You are a social media agency.
Right.
Nothing else, nothing fancy, right? Not even website, not even analytics, nothing to do with any of that stuff. If you could manage a social media page, Twitter account, publish a few updates, produce a report at the end of the month as to how many likes you got, what was the reach, you were a social media agency. So it was a boutique social media agency, Ripple Links.
Got it. And that's very interesting, because I feel, and I keep telling this to everybody I meet, that if you want to be a modern day marketer, I think social is a bedrock, right? Because that's one place where I think your creative and data really intersects. And anything else that you do, you can work in creative isolatedly, in isolated fashion by just working on creative products. And you can also work on performance on the side, because industry is still fragmented. So you might do one or the other for years together, not see the other side.
Yeah.
But social, it's impossible. Yeah. And I think it's something that I sort of have always believed. So I try and put freshers as much as possible in a community management role, or doing ORM, because that's just the basics, right? Yeah. So you understand the pulse of the audience. Do you feel the same, or do you think?
I completely agree. In fact, for anybody who is wanting to get into the industry, social media is where you need to start. Right? Learn the basics, why people hang out on these platforms, what kind of content gets the most engagement, right? How do you change gears, or how do you run campaigns? It's quite easy, right? If you have a slight creative bent of mind, you don't necessarily need to be the data-driven social media marketer to run social media, right? So I think it's a great way for a marketer to start. Easiest way, especially if somebody wants to get into the industry, social media is the easiest and the best way to get started.
Very true. And for me, because I was working on social media, there came a point where paid media was so natively integrated into Facebook and Instagram at that point in time. And funny enough, I keep saying this, I've never set up a Google campaign in my life. Okay. I've sat next to people who have done it, but personally I haven't, because just the nature of being involved so deeply in creative at that point in time, I think it was just natural segue for me was into paid media on Instagram and Facebook. And Instagram, I think in 2015-16, had just come in, if I'm not wrong. you could optimize for cost per engagement, if I'm
Cost
not
per
wrong.
engagement.
That was the early days. But I realized that, okay, I'm creating content now. I want people to see it. And as a function, okay, now let me promote it. And then that's how I got into it. And then I think by function of me doing it, other people started doing it. And then we stumbled into paid media and performance. That's, to be honest, how we ended up there. But what was like, how did the transition happen for you? Because to be honest, most people work in social media and never see paid media in their life.
That's true.
But how did that happen for you?
I would again give credit to that 500 rupee program that I did. The reason why I have the workshop that I teach at 500 rupees is very philosophical. It is because that was a 500 rupee investment is the one that changed my life, right? It was a complete digital marketing program. Even if I have to take that program today, it is relevant today.
Mm-hmm.
It was so beautifully done. It covered every bits and pieces of digital, right? From your website, email, search, mobile app. Even when mobile apps were not
Right.
existing at that time, it covered everything. It was way too advanced, way ahead of its time. And that because I learned that, I always had a broader perspective of things within digital. Even though the company, my first job, they were primarily social media agency.
Right.
I was an agency marketer trying to talk to the clients. I started telling them about search. I started telling them about blog, SEO, SEM. Starting with Facebook ads and stuff like that. We started getting business. Clients wanted us to do more of that and not just creative, right? That is the time I was also trying to be an influencer myself,
Right.
because this was early days and I didn't know what else to do. I had to figure out different ways. So I had a blog. Those days I had a lifestyle blog, and I was blogging, meeting a lot of blogging friends and stuff like that. I came up with the concept of influencer marketing, right? We did a couple of really popular campaigns, and this was a time when nobody else was offering this as a service. This was back in 2013, right? When influencer marketing as a service did not exist. At that time, if it was called influencer marketing, it's largely Twitter trending campaigns. If you manage to trend a hashtag, Pan India one day, you are called influencer marketing.
Right.
But we were doing a lot of blogger meets. Campaign being pushed to bloggers and then converting them into stories.
Right.
Largely blogs. Not the way influencer marketing exists today. It was largely blogs, and YouTube channels weren't even a big deal.
Right.
So because of my exposure to various things, I always kept trying new things, and I did not lose sight of other things just because I was primarily a social media marketer. Right. So even though I started my career as a title social media marketer, I ended up doing all of these things, and the company gave me that opportunity to test a lot.
Right. And typically, what were the clients there like?
The first company?
Yeah.
It was a largely B2C brands, Marico, P&G, AirAsia, Asian Paints.
Nice.
And influencer marketing was a game changer for Triple Links.
Right. Yeah.
The reason we had to part ways at that time is because the company wanted to go influencer marketing and I wanted to be a digital marketer. Right. And that turned out to be a game changer. Pretty much every brand that they were talking to wanted to do an influencer marketing campaign. It was a big deal. Now I think they're doing pretty well in influencer marketing.
Yeah, we worked with them, so I know.
Yeah?
Yeah, we have. I think a couple of years back, maybe. Not sure. But yeah, I think, and from there, you went to Webenza.
Yeah, from there I went to Webenza as an individual contributor, as a digital marketer. And I think the time that I joined Webenza, we were about 15, 16 odd people.
Oh, wow. So early days.
Early days. We had an office in Whitefield 2015. And I met Puneet, and there was a strong connection as we started talking. There again was the main challenge. There was different teams. There was an SEO person, there was an SEM person, client servicing team, creative team. These were all in silos.
Yeah.
One of the main jobs that I had, an opportunity that I identified for myself, is why is it operating in silos and why can't we think integrated, right? And we started pitching that as a service to most of the clients that were coming to us. Right? Hey, don't look at everything separately. Think of an integrated digital marketing strategy, wherein search comes into play, social comes into play, advertising comes into play. Instead of you coming and asking us, do SEO for me, right? Whether in terms of which service you want from me, that's secondary. But let me help you, think of an integrated digital marketing strategy, right? So this is how, Webenza happened, and we grew pretty fast.
Right.
Again, I think I identified that sweet spot, and Puneet was very well supportive of the fact that, hey, we need to pitch integrated marketing. And my boss Puneet also comes from US. He's lived in the US for almost 20 years, and he's always had the client's perspective. How does a client think? What does a client want from a partner or an agency, right? So when both of these combined, I think we've had massive success in the initial days.
Right. Got it. And sorry, this was in 2015, something around.
Yeah, this was around 2015 to 2016.
Yeah,
Integrated digital marketing as a service
was big.
and then performance marketing happened, wherein I still remember that day. It was very similar to this conference room, and I was taking a meeting with a VC firm.
Right.
And because we were doing too well and the conversion rates were so high, every client that I was talking to, every client that we were speaking to, we ended up closing them.
Right.
And I used to carry a lot of attitude.
Mm.
This was a time, I think every marketer goes through that phase where you think you're the best in the world. And I got locked in the conference room and I was taking this meeting with the VC. They were predominantly US and they started investing in businesses in India.
Right.
And he started asking a few questions. Okay, how many landing pages do you test for an offer or for a campaign? I said one landing page is more than what you need.
Right.
I said, what are you saying? That we run 36 different landing page variations for one offer.
Right.
I said, what nonsense? What is this? And that person kept cornering me. He started asking me about conversion rate optimization, CAC
Right.
optimization, average order value, return on investment. These are all not the metrics that we were exposed to.
Right.
Like largely the metrics that we were exposed to is like engagement,
Reach.
website traffic. Okay, you got a few clicks, leads at best, right? We are not exposed to the startup metric at all. And I was so disappointed that day because this was the first meeting that humbled me.
Right.
Like, dude, there is so much out there in the world. There is so much happening and you're not keeping up with it. You're just keeping up with what India is doing, right? So then I started learning everything about this, right? Everything about CRO to start with, conversion rate optimization, running experiments. Why do we need different landing pages? Why do we need to run so many creative variations? How to come up with an offer, right? Within channels, what types of tests do you run, right? When we got into that level, it actually led to that birth of performance marketing as a service. Right. I mean, we were still figuring it out if that is the right word, because at that time, this word existed. It's not like we invented that word. This word existed, but people understood the terminology differently.
True.
People thought that if you pay for performance, it's called performance marketing.
Right.
No, that's affiliate marketing.
Right.
So we found that, okay, this is a sweet spot. It looks like what we are doing and what this term has to offer is very closely aligning. And it also sells well.
Right.
Performance marketing, when you pitch performance marketing as a service, first of all, people are curious. Okay, what the hell is performance
What is it?
marketing? It sounds very exciting, right? Like your Red Bull energy drink, whether it works or not. That is what led to performance marketing,
Right.
and then there is no stopping.
Yeah, and this is also the time when you had to not only go and sell, just like your services, but you had to convince why they needed to adopt digital as an option, right, as a channel.
So industry also kept evolving.
Yeah.
Sanand. The way I look at it, I think every 2 years, especially in India, the industry takes a massive turn, right? Initially, it was all about getting likes. Then it was getting a few bloggers to talk about you, right? Then it is about getting impressions and driving traffic to your website. Then it was about leads. Then around 2017-18, people really started questioning the ROI of the money that they are putting in marketing. Right? They realized that impressions is not ROI. Likes is not ROI. So people really started questioning, okay, I'm putting $1. How is this coming back to me?
Right.
Explain that to me. And that is what led to the birth of performance marketing.
Right. And this shift that you talk about, right, that every 2 years, is that is that happening at a global scale or is that purely in India? And if it's happening in India, is it because of the Western influence or global influence, or is it because we as a market are just advancing? Where do you think
that's a
that?
great question. I think it used to be like that. Not anymore. When I say not anymore,
You mean it was because influenced by?
We were influenced
Right.
by West for a very long time. Whatever happens in the US happens in India 2 years down the line.
Yeah.
And we will get influenced by that. We will start doing it,
And-
but not after COVID.
Right.
After COVID, I look at it as a level playing field.
Right.
It's not we are behind or they are ahead. We are at a level playing field. Maybe they'll come up with fresh terminologies. And because of the influence that the West has, they can propagate it across the world.
Right.
And get everybody to think, okay, this is how you do it. But I don't think we are behind. But the previous years, I'm talking about pre-COVID, we were always behind and we were always catching up. And if you were to learn marketing back then, before 2017-16, you were always learning from the West.
True.
There is hardly anybody from
Yeah.
India that you could learn from, right? Going back to same thing that you said,
Yeah.
hey, that we have extraordinary marketers. These extraordinary marketers do not come and talk to people. They don't share their knowledge. There is no
Teach.
platform for them to share their knowledge. So we were always behind, despite being a country with wealth of knowledge. And we always looked up to somebody in the West.
Yeah.
And West always had this upper hand of propagating, okay, this
What
is how we
should-
need to do marketing, right?
Yeah.
And we caught up on the same terminologies and we were always behind, but things have changed.
Yeah.
post-COVID.
And when we say West, as marketers, it's
Yeah.
often just USA because
It is.
they are like whatever said and done, like just pioneers, right? In
Yeah.
the field, like they just know, they get it very differently. I think it's
Yes.
ingrained in their culture, in society, partly because I think they're a relatively a new country because it was formed maybe just 2 centuries ago. Didn't have that kind of history that we have, or
Mhm.
so they come with less baggage, and as a result, it's easier to innovate there. I guess
Yeah.
I just get
And I
get
also
the feeling.
find them to have a lot more clarity
Yeah.
than what we do as, I mean, I'm not generalizing
True.
what we do as a country, but when I speak to an American, despite being slightly lesser talented, but the clarity of thought and the way they communicate that thought is always exceptional.
True.
It probably worked in their favor.
Yeah, and that's I think a very interesting point because in our field as well, more than the wealth of knowledge, what you need is the ability to set a very clear goal,
Yeah.
and then be very sure of what is your path to that goal because there are multiple ways to get there. And I think do you feel that that's lacking in India, where I think there's a lot of looking across the table to other person or other organizations and seeing what are they doing,
Yes.
and if they're setting X as their goal, then should we also set X?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I think even today, we all look up to a lot of what our competition is doing.
Right.
We get influenced by our immediate bosses who is not necessarily expected what is happening now, right? They all kind of influence our decision making, right? And directions, right? And it all depends on the marketing leader of an organization. If that marketing leader is clueless, directionless, they will end up driving everybody in the team nuts, the agency nuts, and you together do not end up achieving anything.
Right.
Right? And that is where I feel the reason why modern Indian organizations, when it comes to hiring CMOs, they always hire the US, not from India.
Right. True.
But things are changing. Like I said, things are changing. A lot of Indian organizations, especially the young, modern organizations, the marketing leaders are so young, and they can compete on a global level. So unlike yesteryears, where we've had these traditional marketers who were so one-sided, opinionated about everything, when they were taking calls for us, there was lack of clarity. And even if you want to do something creative and innovative that can actually compete with other brands on the global level, the supervisors or the seniors of the organizations, they never let you do it. Yeah.
Right. And why do you think that now that change is coming in India? Why is it? Because we have a lot of young marketers as a function of which in the workforce, and as a function of which they're always looking out to what are the new things to do, and innovation is coming from there, or has someone just turned the switch on in the boardrooms, post COVID, where I'm sure there's been some amount of digital transformation that's been forced. But what's been that change? Because I've also noticed that leading up to 2020, I think there was a point in 2015, yes, where you had to go and justify what the ROI is.
Yeah.
2020 lesser.
Mm-hmm.
Post 2020, no questions anymore. Now it's about unrealistic ROI.
Yeah.
Right? They think that you just run an ad and then
switch it
100x.
on
Yeah, 100x returns.
Jackpot.
So, but there has been some change, and I think it's better to talk to somebody who's expecting results than to talk to someone where you need to convince this is the best way.
Yes.
So I think as marketers, it's sort of changed. But what do you think has been the trickle? I mean, yes, COVID, but within that, I'm sure there's been something else, right?
A couple of things. One is the old school companies still haven't changed.
Yeah, and they won't.
And it's very difficult. It's more like a habit. Right? It's just like asking if I had to ask my dad, you have to start walking every second hour. He's not going to do that. Quit smoking. He's not going to do that. Right? So that's the same thing. That's the same thing that has happened with older organizations, with old school marketers. But what has changed, in my opinion, is access to information.
Right.
Earlier, it was always guarded. The knowledge was always guarded. There were very few companies who were good at it, and they were not sharing that information with the world. Now things are different. I mean, with rise in EdTech, fast internet connection, a lot of communities, a lot of willingness from people to share information with others, right? A lot of cohort-based programs, a lot of practitioners-based programs that is coming up. All of this has opened up floodgates of information, which means, I know exactly what a company that you think as the best at marketing is doing. I can quickly reverse engineer it with the tools that are available to you. And I know exactly what is the approach or what is the thought behind that went into that particular campaign. Right? So we have tools, we have information, we have a lot of communities, we have access to a lot of people, and things have made it easier. That is why I said it's not a one-sided game anymore, it's a level playing field.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting. And I think on that note, what is your take on the current state of EdTech? It was a gold rush, maybe a few years ago. Everyone was saying this is where it where the potential sort of was for profitability and for high valuations. Obviously, within that, there are now multiple types of EdTech companies. There are ones focusing on K-12. There are ones in after school programs for that same age category. There are ones who can do skill enhancement while you're on the job for better opportunity. There are multiple things that are coming now. Where do you see the state? Where do you see this heading?
See, I think EdTech has solved convenience. See, there are a couple of things, right? One is when I look at education, it's affordability, convenience, and impact.
Right.
Now there are companies that have solved affordability because whatever was available to you for a couple of lakhs, it's available to you for free, pretty much, right? Or at a very less price. Convenience, it's available to you immediately with faster internet connection. What EdTechs are not solving yet or fully solved is impact. Okay, you're coaching something, you're making it available and it is affordable, but what is the impact that it is making? Why did students go back to school? Why are they not continuing on online education program? Why is the students pushing them to school and not continue the online education program? It's the same with a lot of other EdTech, right? Okay, I took one program, it was impactful, but the second program, it was not impactful. So that impact is something I don't think a lot of EdTechs have solved it yet.
Right. But can you solve it in the current model of what EdTech is?
It's difficult. It's difficult because impact is not necessarily only the company.
Right. It's
a lot on the individual.
Right.
Right. The individual is not really cooperating, and if they are not really practicing what has been taught, there is no impact. Otherwise, it's just knowledge, right? And if it is just sitting in your head, you are going to forget it in a couple of months, and there is no impact.
Right.
So it's difficult. Similarly, jobs. Let's say if I have to look at career transition, if there is a program that can assure me of a job, provided I commit to that program fully, right? That space is still open. There are a few companies that are trying to solve it. Some companies tried to solve it, but now shut it down because they realize it's the student that has to cooperate. You can't make a promise saying that I'll get you a job. Because at the end of the day, it's not your cousin's company.
Right.
Where you say, okay, hire all of these people who have taken up my courses. It still is yet to be solved. But when it is solved, I think the gold rush will be back again.
Right.
For example, if I very clearly know I'm going to put X amount of money and X amount of time into something, and I'm going to get an output, if that is sorted in a way, I think it'll be back at it again, back to its golden time.
Right. So, so do you believe that impact would come sometime in the future?
It would.
Right.
It would.
Okay. So it's very interesting because I'm a little skeptic about it. For me, it's if the impact would come. Maybe it's coming from the fact that you were academically inclined and maybe I wasn't.
Yes. So I'm seeing it. Right? Yeah. The reason I do it with Growth School is because I'm seeing the impact.
Right.
Right. Especially when I spend a little more time with an individual, the impact is much higher. It's just that my time is not democratized. Right. It's very limited.
Right.
How do we scale this? For example, can I pick or can I train 4 or 5 people who has similar amount of knowledge and experience, right? Or can I train an NLP or an AI? It's an experiment that we are running. There is something called Deepan AI.
Wow.
Which Growth School has built, right? Which takes every information that Deepan has ever taught, right? Every question and answer that Deepan has ever answered. Now you don't have to go to that video and access it. You can ask the bot, right? So things like this is what is making me to believe, yes, there is a way you can scale, and it is not necessarily dependent on one person.
Right.
And if you're able to work really close with that person, and that person is getting information, getting help at every step of the way, they're going to see an impact. And we've already seen, I mean, without any reason, this program wouldn't have been taken by 2,000 odd people, right? Every time at the end of a cohort, what I do is an impact study. What did this program help you achieve? Did it help you get a job, get a hike, right? Or help you achieve better results if you're a business owner? Right. And we measure that instead of course completion. Course completion is a vanity metric.
Right.
Whether you attended specific weeks, you attended my live session, it's like school attendance. It's a vanity metric.
Got it.
But have you got that impact? Which means my purpose is
Right.
achieved.
And is impact measurement measured through how much progression they've had in their career, or have they landed a new job? Like,
Yes.
okay.
So whether you got a new job, or you
Oh.
had a change of job with a better hike, or if you're running your campaigns, are you seeing better results?
Right.
Right. If you're rating out of that, and every time we see massive impact. Let's say if there's a cohort filled with about 100 people, 70 people end up completing the program fully, and out of that 70, 55 see an impact, which is a very good number.
Right. So, very interesting. You said something really interesting about AI. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But also want to make it clear. While I don't, I'm skeptic of the impact.
Yeah.
I am an investor in a couple of these EdTech companies. My thought process has been, I feel in the way the world is advancing, there's a lot of insecurity about being left behind. Just by the sheer way in which technology is sort of
Yes.
progressing, and that's driving people to take a lot of courses. Like I remember when I was growing up, going for engineering tuitions were a thing. I don't know if you did it, but I know all of my friends around my circles did it, because that sense, it was a competition to get into the best of the best. Yeah, it was, right. and that drove
Yeah.
mass admissions for specific IIT, JE, I guess, and other courses. And I know at one point in time, I remember there were like just 2 or 3 of us in our group who were not going for it, because we had opted for commerce and so forth. But I feel there's something similar now, with digital being one. I feel AI will be that for the next 2 years, and there would be something else that comes after. This is always the case. And I think that's always happens when when there's an understanding that, hey, the market has advanced and we have been left behind. It comes once in a decade or so. So that's my personal belief. But I think you're someone who's entrenched in it. You would probably look at it differently, and you would have
So
understanding.
it is yes and no both, right? For example, a while ago, AR was a big deal,
Right.
augmented reality.
Yeah.
VR, when Facebook bet big on it, everybody thought the world is going to be VR. You and I, we are not going to talk like this, right? Our avatars are going to be talking to each
Yeah.
other. But I don't look at it AI in the similar way,
Right.
right? AI is here to stay. It has already accelerated a lot of progress. To give you an example, I work for a SaaS company today. And we were supposed to launch a few very important features 6 months down the line. And ChatGPT came in, we launched it in 45 days.
Right.
Because whatever ChatGPT was offering today, we were supposed to build it on our own, and hence that 6-month roadmap. Right? This is one use case. Similarly, I've been talking about automated campaigns. Right? Automated campaigns, end of the day, is AI.
Right.
Where the machine is taking the bidding calls for you, machine is doing the copies for you, machine is doing the ads for you, machine is optimizing the campaign for you. AI is not one of these trends. Similarly, I'm not sure if you've heard, Google's traffic for the first time is going down.
Yeah.
I myself haven't gone to Google in a very long time. Only if I am not getting that accurate answers on ChatGPT or Bard, that's when I go to Google. So I strongly feel AI is here to stay. It is unlike any of the other trends. And as a modern professional, especially if you're a corporate professional, you're looking at corporate career, you need to adopt it. There is no way. And if you're not going to, there are other people who will adopt it and they will get ahead of you.
Yeah.
So unlike anything else that has happened, and it's a lot of FOMO, but even if you have to go back to the IIT example, yes, there was a FOMO. There is FOMO even today.
Yeah.
AI is going to be one of those.
True.
So
And I think there will be ones who succeed, and then there'll be ones who just go in for the FOMO, and then
Absolutely.
as a result, say, taper off a few years later. I think that's a trend.
always there. That's
Yeah.
why you either go really deep into it, or you just get a surface level understanding of it, or you just stay out of it. Right? It depends on what career path you want to take.
Right. And this is a good point to ask you this question. So, what do you think is that one skill that a marketer really needs in today's day and age?
Got it. I think, are you asking it from an agency?
No, I
perspective
think
or a
in
brand
general,
perspective?
a marketer perspective. Let's just either of the
General
two. Not
marketer,
yeah.
okay.
I know there'll be a lot of micro nuances that get added if you're an agency or brand.
The answer is going to be
Different.
right? It's deeper understanding, at least in my opinion, is super deep understanding of your customers. Otherwise, your target market, right? Now, the reason I asked, hey, is it an agency marketer or a client-side marketer? It's really difficult for an agency marketer to get a deeper understanding of the customer because they expect this information from the client to be shared. And if the client is not customer savvy, they wouldn't share any of this information. They will give you surface level persona information, okay, age, demographic, this is my audience, right? That is not understanding of customers, right?
Right.
So I would say one thing that will set you apart from the rest of the market is not really whether you know ChatGPT or you know a few additional prompts or you know how to set up GA4 for your website. It's not really that, because all of that information ChatGPT can give you step by step. So even you have that knowledge, it's hardly a differentiator anymore. But a deeper understanding of your customers, which means, okay, when does the customer actually think about you? What pains do the customers have? How do they go about solving it today? And what kind of a difference can you make in customers' lives? If you understand that, and this often, it cannot happen just by sitting and looking at the laptop. You need to talk to the customers. You really talk to the customer. Of course, analytics tools, of course, heat map tools can give you quantitative data in terms of how the customer behavior is, but you really need that qualitative information, one-to-one connect with the customer. When do they think about you? What is their perception of you? If you were to change the perception, or if you are showing something to the customer, how is the customer reacting to it? So a deeper understanding of the customer, I think it's going to be a key skill for a marketer. Yeah.
Got it. And so I have a counter to the point you made on how at agencies it's hard to get that,
Yeah.
right? And I understand where it comes from. I feel unless you really seek information, it will not come your way.
Yes.
Whereas if you're on the brand side, that information is just, you can't not be privy to it. But I think if you are of that particular mold as a seeker who goes out and gets that extra information, who's obsessed, right, about customer, then even if you don't get it from your client, you have the option of getting it from the market, right?
Yeah.
Because of the nature of what agencies are, you're always dabbled in 3 to 4 industries or categories. So you sort of have understanding, and then you mix and match, and over time it enhances you. So do you think that that's like, is it centric to just having the right person, or is it more of the way the structure is that no matter how much an agency person tries, there will be a limitation to how much you can get access to?
There will be a limitation, because even if the agency marketer is savvy, what they will get is secondary information, secondary research information. Could be about a category, could be about an industry, but not about the specific customers of that brand.
Right.
Because the brand has to open that for the agency.
Right.
You can't jump into conversations with the customers of a brand, right? The brand has to enable that, right? And there are so many difficulties that a brand has, because for an example, I work for a SaaS brand. I know that I need to be talking to a customer, and we have like 6,000, 7,000 odd customers, right? It is very difficult for me to talk to my customer today. The reason is, the customers are in the US, very limited time slots. The customer may have had some issues with us, so the customer is not willing to talk to you, right?
Right.
Whoever is available, that's not the customer that you want to talk to. So every brand has this challenges of opening up, let's say, conversation with customers to an agency.
Right.
And the marketer who is on the other side will have very similar challenges, and hence they don't have deeper understanding.
Right.
So you always are limited to that. See, sometimes we really see those campaigns and feel like, oh, why didn't I think of it, right? That happens because of deeper understanding of customers.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you think brands enable this enough? Because sometimes, I mean, it's two sides. Both have to put their best foot forward. I know in agencies often it comes down to the hustle and bustle of what the day is looking like, and then there's always a constraint of time, and as a result you don't go out of that whatever minimum scope you're supposed to do, right? So I think a lot of times agencies expect to be fed with this information.
Yes.
And I think brands at some level expect the agency to be more proactive and seek out that information.
It's more of a process change, I would say. Brands will have to democratize this information to their internal teams and the agency.
Right.
For example, how about you make a regular process where the customers will have to answer a few questions. For example, we have, for our customer support, we have something called intercom, where customers chat with us, right? And the head of customer support usually publishes a newsletter at the end of the month as to the themes of conversations, right? Similarly, our sales team, when they speak to customers, they also talk about where do they win and where do they lose the customers. And they democratize this information to us on a monthly basis, on a bi-weekly basis, in a form of a newsletter. Similarly, my product team, if they've been receiving feedback from customers and they've built something based on the feedback, and they relay that information back to us. Now, you can either be restrictive about this information, or you can share this information with your agency partners. So they're also equally enabled with all of these suggestions. It's more of a process thing that the brands will have to do to enable everybody who's involved in, let's say, whether it is an internal marketing team or an agency.
Right. This is a good point to ask you. What do you think is the future of agency and brand relationship or agency client relationship in the future, because with AI coming in, and we'll get into that too, and obviously with the change and with people like you upskilling and training marketers, I think dependency on an external organization like an agency is reducing a little bit, right? And now again, it comes down to org DNA and their philosophy, because some still want to work with an agency for various reasons, some don't for various reasons. Where do you see that heading?
Couple of things. I don't think it's gonna. Personally, I don't think it's gonna change a lot, because there will always be brands who do not know how to do it.
Yeah.
And there are brands who are mature, right? For the brands who do not know how to do it, they need a full service agency to guide them in the initial days. So it's a huge market, because every day newer
New
businesses are born and they need marketing help before they start hiring their marketing team and scaling them. On the other hand, mature brands who has done everything, who really knows how each of these channels work, each of the medium work, they would start looking out for highly specialized agencies. I know, they would have the resources to invest in an in-house team, but the in-house team is very difficult for them to continuously upskilling themselves, continuously solving newer challenges that are outside their brand, right? It cannot come naturally, right? Whereas an agency, because of their experience of having worked with different brands, they will bring all of that experience to the table. So I think specialized agencies will still, it's the future, right? For example, performance marketing is still it can become very generic, but for example, a creative performance marketing.
We spoke about this.
We spoke about it, right? An ABM specialized agency, right? A lead gen specialized agency, right? Some of these are already existing, and I think it exists in the West. I haven't seen a lot in India. I've seen a lot of them pop up in the US. They're highly specialized at one thing, and they do go really deep in it. They become the subject matter expert. Every time you search for something around it, these people come up at the top in the form of blogs or on LinkedIn, right? So I think that is the future, in my opinion. Either you can still very well survive as a full service agency, but the brands that you are catering to are people who are not mature. If you want to cater to mature brands out there, you need to be really good at something.
Right, and there's also now a lot of agencies that are category focused, right?
Yeah.
Which are just catering to EdTech or just doing D2C, etc. Or even within D2C, there are certain specializations that are picking up. One sort of question I've had, and I think this is maybe coming from my involvement or my interactions with people from traditional creative organizations, where non-competes and exclusivity is looked at very deeply, because assume and then maybe it's coming also from the fact that they deal with only Fortune 500 companies, but if you do a Coca-Cola, you cannot do a Pepsi, right? It comes from there. So there's a lot of say they look at agencies and then say we want somebody just for us and not working with any of our say 5 competitors. Funny enough, in performance it's the other way around, wherein
they want
you'll work with a competition if we want to work with you, because and I've found it very strange as to why it is. I don't have an answer yet. I'm trying to decode it as time goes by. I don't know if you've come across this.
Of course.
So why do you think that is?
I think a lot of brands contradict themselves.
Right.
Especially when it comes to this. Hey, you should have worked with somebody in my industry, but you shouldn't be working with them now. Active. Right? That's stupid. Right? How would you... I mean, how... If I'm an agency for a couple of years, and let's say I'm specialized for finance as an industry, right? And I would have worked with one of them, and some of them would be active, right? And you can't put a clause on me saying that, no, you cannot. So the way we have solved it, at least in my time at Webenza, is we assure them there are 2 different teams.
Right.
And we openly sign up for a clause. There is absolutely no way information gets shared between these 2 teams. There is no common meetings that happen between these 2 teams. And we worked with a lot of competitors together. And it's a healthy competition internally as well. And the brands were typically okay with it. I mean, there are still a few nonsensical brands who say that you cannot be working with my competitor. You say no to them.
Right.
Simple.
Right.
Unless the business is very high. Let's be practical about it.
You sell to who are sellable, or else you don't. Right.
Absolutely. So if they're going to take care of my revenue, that can potentially come from 6 different brands. Why not?
Right. The other side of you is also one of an investor, right? You've maybe just started off investing in certain startups that you somewhere feel a connect to. How do you go about deciding or making that call?
So I put money on people that I trust the most, right? And number two is I would put money on something that I would personally pay money for. If the reason I put, in a couple of startups, and I've invested in a couple of agencies, one healthcare startup and one EdTech startup.
Right.
The reason is because I would buy their shares.
Right.
And I know the founders personally, right? So this is basically the philosophy of me investing in any startup. If it doesn't fit, for example, I'm of course part of multiple communities where I get a lot of offers, but I don't know the founder.
Right.
Even though the product may sound too exciting on paper, and I would personally put money into it. If I don't know the person who is going to be running the show, I'm not gonna.
Right.
And I will stay this way. I don't think I'll become this prolific angel investor ever. I would continue to put money in startups that I trust the most.
Right. So, what do you think is more important in that investing decision-making process? Is it the organization or the product rather, or is it the people?
It's people. It's the founder.
So you bet on the jockey, not the horse.
Because I know the founder will figure it out.
Right. Right.
My money is not going to go down the drain.
Right.
And I mean, you would have seen that big warning, right? While you're investing in angel platforms, they say, okay, this money can potentially become zero immediately.
Great disclaimer.
Yeah.
But I think that is another ecosystem in India. I think that's changing very well, where you can get your customers to be your angel investors, right?
Yeah.
I think there's that happening a lot. I think it's super interesting.
Yeah. Globally, even there's a recent stat I read that lesser than 1% of VCs come from marketing background.
Right.
And they are very, I mean, there are specialized companies, who are bringing in marketers and getting them to invest in companies and offering their expertise, right? So things are changing. Things are taking, just like in the agency world where you're taking specialization, similarly in the VC world, you're getting practitioners, professionals, and not necessarily people who come from traditional VC background to invest in business. Interesting.
On that note, just going back to that AI conversation that we had about, the Deepan AI now.
Yeah.
Is that like a chat GPT equivalent where you feed in prompts and it gives you, or is it more of a replica of how you are when you take a class, like a visual avatar
It's the former.
Okay.
So it's more chat GPT.
Right.
I mean, it can actually become personalized in the future. For example, I'm sometimes sarcastic. I have a certain tone.
Right.
I usually tease people.
Right.
Like, hey, why can't you Google this? Why are you asking me this question? Something. So you can actually, the more person it becomes, as of now, it's just a chat GPT equivalent. You ask a question, it will give you an answer.
Right. So adding Deepan there it's more of like that. It's a way of branding it, right? Of sorts.
Because way of branding, and it's also Deepan's knowledge base.
Got it.
Like
So
it's not chat GPT giving its own answers.
Understood.
It tries and takes answers from Deepan's knowledge base.
Got it.
Because I've answered 10,000 questions. That's a lot of knowledge base, right? If it is not able to find that, then it will quote ChatGPT. ChatGPT itself will give you that.
Understood.
Yeah.
So does this learn of your sessions, of your classes? Is that where the...
we have a community.
Okay.
Wherein this Q&As usually are in
right.
text format.
Understood. So you've already answered those.
Yes, I've answered a ton of these questions.
I see.
Yeah.
Understood. Very interesting. Very interesting. So do you see that as a future where you at one point you would not be taking classes, but your AI would, and then you will probably earn royalties of it?
I don't think people will like it.
Yeah.
Right? Because in fact we tried automating it a couple of times, wherein instead of doing it live, we recorded something and we told it, hey, it's a recorded thing, right? The response rate was really poor. I think there is a bit of a thing for live, bit of thing for human that still exists. If an AI is coming in and coaching them, I don't think there is anything personal in it.
Right.
So it will exist in some form or shape, but I don't think it will technically replace what I do today.
But at some point, because when I look at AI and I look at what it does from an efficiency standpoint, what it helps to do is replicate human intelligence or human efficiency, right? That's essentially what it does. So at some point, could there be a scenario where you need to take 5 sessions at the same time, and then you obviously can't be in all 5, and then AI takes your place? Because I see that as a practical sort of, say, solution in the EdTech, at least
it's
in
totally
current.
Possible.
Yeah.
We are already seeing deep fakes, right? Wherein, we're having Trump and Elon Musk come and talking. Today it looks a bit artificial, the way they are talking. It might become better in the future, right? It might become too realistic where you cannot differentiate between an AI and a real human. So it's totally possible, especially with the advancements that is happening in AI. Every day I'm coming across some mind-blowing tool. Right? You won't believe, a colleague of mine shared this tool with me, AI tool. It, in real time, it changes your accent.
Yeah.
For example, I'm talking to you in an Indian accent, but imagine at the end of it, when you're hearing it, you're hearing an American speaking. Real time. It's not recorded and then accentuated later.
Right.
It's real time.
Right.
So some crazy cool things are happening in this space, and it's happening too fast.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get FOMO. I feel left behind. Right?
But what percentage of those innovations do you think today are ready for deployment? Because often at times it's a lot of trial and error. You create 10 things, one probably or two work, and then out of the two, one has market fit.
Yeah.
So you think right now, because I get a sense that there's a lot of experimentation, because again, it's a gold rush moment, right? Everyone's sort of trying to say punt it and see if one innovative say product has a fit, then it will take off in big way, like what ChatGPT essentially did, right? So you think that is sort of the case now, where everyone in marketing at least is, because AI in marketing has been a conversation for a while, right? And if you look at what programmatic does in a lot of ways, it is the closest what we had to AI many years back. I have my own reservations on its effectiveness because of its nature of how it is.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't have to have.
Okay, great. We are in the right. I'm in the right room. No, because there are. I just feel programmatic is in a way rigged in a way, right, to favor publishers and to inflate that top line number for a certain kind of marketers who look at hitting metrics as the only way, because again certain agencies and organizations are structured in such a way where it's all about spends, it's all about the top line, it's all about hitting those inflated metrics, and they hate Facebook and Google, by the way, for the same reason, right? It's so creative.
That's why I tell people, right, a lot of what you do is already programmatic.
100%. So
when you choose an automated bidding strategy, when you choose a Google Performance Max, when you are letting the machine take the call for you in terms of what bidding strategy you should be using, it's already programmatic. And of course, there are these programmatic only channels, which is very similar to what you spoke about, predominantly meant for branding. At least what they sell is branding. The impact is questionable. But it's not like something crazily new. You're already doing that.
Right.
Many people think that programmatic is a separate channel which can do magic.
Right.
So you're already doing programmatic. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. So do you think that once more of such innovations come in, there is, I think there is definitely some form of threat to what agencies would do, because anytime there's a technological advancement, agencies need to adapt. So do brands, because now even brand managers can be replaced, or maybe if you have 5, you can optimize to 3, and then AI can fill in for 2. Same could happen to an agency, right? By the extension of that. How far away do you think we are from that? You cited an example of how you were able to create a fast track a launch of a product.
Yes.
Significantly. It's 45 days versus 6 months is massive. So where do you see a future is for that kind of workforce? Because I believe if you're not keeping up, if you're not that growth mindset oriented marketer, you're in trouble.
Yes.
And that's something I try to preach to anyone and everybody that comes through my organization at least. But where do you see that first layer of impact is going to be?
I think inefficiency will be weeded out sooner than we think. Right? I think in our heart we deeply know what are we efficient at and what are we inefficient at. And it's really time to evaluate that inefficiency and work on it. Because for example, I can talk about inefficient copywriting. That is already replaced. We, in fact, go to our copywriters to review the output rather than creating a new output. For basic ones, extremely creative copywriting, it's still not replaced, but the inefficient basic copywriting, language writing, long form content rephrasing, all of that is already replaced. And if you are one of those inefficient people who can't really think creative, your job is already at risk. So you're absolutely right. You need to adapt. And you really need to adapt for your inefficiencies, where your inefficiencies are, and you can actually think about which AI is solving for that inefficiency and adapt it rather than getting scared.
So that was going to be my next question, because I know so many people who are terrified of just basic data from platforms. If you show them a chart of CPM, CTR, just basic stuff, they're like, oh shit, this is not for me, I'm not a data person. Is there a role for anybody in marketing who does not understand or embrace data? Do you think in the next decade you can survive as being somebody who has another individual interpreting data? Because this is again a sort of behavior in the creative fields where they don't want to understand what data means, right? And I look at it, and I've found very few of them, where like maybe 1% of creative people who are interested in knowing data just out of that curiosity of saying how can I better my work. And just generally, I think the trend is also even they depend on someone like you or me to say, can you interpret it for me and tell me what it is. So, and then there's a side that just doesn't want to even know what the interpretation is, right? They're in their own sort of trip, as I call it. What do you think is the future for them in the next 10 years?
I think creative is subjective, right? And how I define versus how you define versus a creative director in a
Right.
agency defining is different.
But the results are objective.
Results are objective. So I strongly think the creative folks will never lose their livelihood in some form or shape. It will exist in.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have to become a data expert per se, but it doesn't hurt for them to adopt it. For example, okay, you're producing a work. Don't you really want to know the effectiveness? Right? It may sound a little complicated in terms of how that effectiveness is presented to you, but if you actually make that attempt to understand it or ask the person who's presenting to humanize it for you and try to understand it better, it's only going to benefit that person. But I don't think, let's say, there will be AI in the near future that is going to replace these extremely creative people. They will always figure out their way. Throughout centuries, right? There was always threat for creative people, but they figured their way out. But inefficient creatives, just like inefficient copywriting, inefficient content writers, that can potentially get weeded out. For example, if you were that artist who are doing oil painting and stuff like that, there is Midjourney. Midjourney does amazing art.
Incredible. We use it for referencing, by the way. It's a game changer.
It's a game changer. I mean, it's incredible, right? It's literally like how a person would do it. If you can't do better than Midjourney, you are already at risk.
Yeah. Right? True. Very true.
So, but Midjourney today has its own limitations. So, if you can understand the limitations and you can fulfill that limitation, you will very much be in job. And you still don't have to be that data person. But for how long, we don't know.
Right.
So, instead of predicting future, you might as well adapt.
So, do you think, like, like we discussed of how traditional creative agencies are always guarded and they didn't, share information. Do you think, in a way, the digital folks have done that to the creative people? Because sometimes I feel it's also about simplifying and then, transmitting information, right? If someone is sort of terrified by looking at data, and I understand why that was, because the first time I looked at it, and I hate numbers, or rather I did. Funny enough, now I deal with numbers day in day out. But there was a time in life when I also was sort of not comfortable looking at numbers, etc. But then I had to change that behavior. I did it out of situation. I had to. I didn't have a choice. But then if you have a choice, then you sort of won't. But do you feel the digital, say, marketers of today have somewhere made it a little complex, or maybe a little too much jargon, or maybe because it's all logic at the end of the day. Terms are there for the convenience and the usage when you're in a certain zone and certain room. But do you think that has happened where creatives haven't been, say, inducted into it the right way?
It has. I would totally agree with your statement. Right?
Yeah.
I think digital marketing's field especially is filled with jargons. And there are more jargons every day.
Every day, yeah.
It's really difficult for a digital native marketer to keep up with the jargon. How do you expect a creative person to keep up with it? And I think the responsibility falls solely on the shoulders of the marketer to humanize that information for the creative team instead of expecting the creative team to keep up with the jargons. Yeah.
Right. This is one of the things I preach internally. I keep telling them just dumb it down for the newcomers.
Yes, you really need to humanize it.
Yeah, true. There's something that I noticed on your LinkedIn. Actually, my team brought this up. It's a sort of a pledge that you had made to help people who have lost their jobs.
Yeah.
I know there's a side of you who's very empathetic and is always looking out for people you've worked with. I've heard that from everyone who sort of worked with you in the past. But what was this about? Like this particular mission, if I can call it
this
that?
This is an initiative of Growth School, right? Wherein we know that a ton of people have been laid off unfairly. Especially since last 6 to 8 months. There is just a lot of people, talented, skilled people who have been rated really high. Suddenly losing their jobs is just incredibly sad, right? It's just unimaginable. So I think that's when we feel, how do we do it? I mean, of course, a lot of us have our day jobs. We can't possibly monetarily support them, right? How about we make our skills accessible to them for free? Right, at least give them the trust that we are here with you, right? We are here to upskill you, and you don't really have to worry about making that investments and stuff like that. There is whenever such things happens in life, it all you should always look at that as an opportunity rather than a setback, right? So we did this, a bunch of us mentors and investors who were in growth school. We came together and we've shared a portion of our earning in the form of credits back to the community.
Interesting.
Yeah. So put together, I think it's a.
So it's like a fund.
Yeah, it's a fund. It's a fund. Think of it this way, right? It's a fund, but it's not a fund where we have put our money.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fund that could have eventually come to us.
Understood.
So that's the way we are looking at it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Are you one who likes to partake in charitable initiatives, and like is that something that's been close to your heart, or something that you're?
It has always been, right? In fact, I've been in that situation where I really have been thought multiple times to myself, why can't somebody help me? Why can't somebody guide me, right? Not in terms of, I'm not a big fan of, let's say, giving money to somebody, right? But if I can actually show a career path to somebody, if I can actually help somebody to crack an interview, if I'm actually helping somebody to save their job,
Mm-hmm.
that is what I do a lot of time. I still find time every week, anybody who's asking me for help, and I find time to share whatever that I know to help them out.
Right.
Yeah.
And is that this like so? I know you've always been a mentor. I know so many people who've sort of I worked with in the past as well, who've always cited you as the person who's nudged them and sort of pushed them down to the career path that you're in. How do you find time for all this? I know that you've moved to the brand side in the last few years, but like you said, have you found this post-COVID where you've had more time to sort of partake in a lot of other activities too?
So it's actually post-COVID when it was always happening in some form or shape in my life. All the people that you've spoken to who said that, and I possibly made a little impact in their life, they were all my team.
Right.
And I come with that philosophy that you really have to care about your team. Being a manager, getting job done, that's one thing. But if you truly care about them, what will the person do next? Are you equipping them to take up your role? Are you giving them the right career guidance? If you truly care about that person as a human, that will take care of the job. You don't really have to do anything extra, right? So that's a philosophy that I've always believed in with every team member that I've ever worked with. I've always done right by myself and right by them, right? Instead of being that corporate manager who's only looking at my selfish goals. Okay, I've gotten the best hikes, I've gotten the best rating. Not that. I don't think I will ever be that person. Yeah. So, but after COVID, because I got a lot of time, it gave me an opportunity to spread it outside of my network. So I found a lot of time to help a lot of small businesses who was not funded, helped a lot of young folks, who is trying for a career transition or trying to get into corporate. So these are people who somehow find their way to me, Instagram DMs and LinkedIn DMs, and I find some time to help them out. It makes my heart happy.
Got it. I know I'm like, I want to ask a question, but I don't know how I'm going to ask this. But have you found more time since leaving agencies?
Yes.
Always the case, isn't it?
Yes.
Not surprised.
I'm grateful for everything the agency world has taught me, but you don't always get to work with the nicest of the clients, right? So let's say if you're working with 20 different brands, 15 of them could be nice. There'll be 5 nasty people who will end up ruining your day.
Yeah.
Right? End up ruining a week.
Yeah.
There is always a fire that you need to put out. So every day you don't get to decide your day. The fires that are happening, that gets to decide your day, right? And this is largely, what I like more about brand and do not like about agency, but I've been thankful because of the exposure that you get in agency, you don't get that anywhere else. The career growth that you have in agency, you need not necessarily have that in a brand. And the vibe and the culture, right? People still stick around with agencies. It's for that vibe.
Yeah.
The agency vibe. I'm not sure how to explain that.
Yeah, it is unique in its own way.
It is unique in its own way. There is nothing like being in an agency.
I think agencies are the pioneers of casuals to workplace. I don't think that existed in the corporate traditional settings, back in the day.
Saying it, I now recall,
Yeah, and I think a lot of art and integration of music and stuff like that, extracurriculars at workplace was also one of the things that agencies did. Unfortunately, I think in the last few years is not last few, but I think it's been deteriorating for a long time from what I'm hearing. I think there's just too much, I think, supply of agencies and also demand, but I think it's just very unstructured, uncategorized, as a function of which I think there's very little margins in the business which you can channel back in. So I think you always have to do more and more and more to make that little. So it is a sort of a rush. You see that changing in any way?
I think that's why I said that specialized agencies, they come under premium.
I also feel the same. You have to break out. If you don't break out, really then you're one of the many.
So I talk to a lot of young agency founders, right? The biggest question is, how do we price? Should we price it based on hours? Should we price it based on resources or based on deliverable? These are often the models, right? I keep telling them one thing, that if you actually run around this model, you will never make it really big. You need to command your premium. Yes, of course, you need to account for the cost that you will incur. Let's say if there is an engagement and you're billing a 3 lakh rupee retainer, that in that 3 lakh, okay, 70,000 is your cost, the 230 is your premium.
Right.
How do you increase that 230 to 5? How do you increase that to 7? When you become that expert go-to person in the entire world, in the entire country, you keep increasing that premium.
Yeah.
So that is what I think every agency should fight for, that particular pie. How do I keep increasing that premium? Instead of fighting around deliverables, if you're fighting with deliverables and resources, then you're fighting with the entire world.
Right. True.
Yeah.
It's a Pareto principle, right? The 20% of the players own 80% of the share.
Yeah.
So it's very true. I think that's in every single industry that you look at.
Absolutely.
I think AI will also have that now in some form, shape. There will be one of them. There will be a few that break out. I think it's still early days, but you can make that prediction, saying that there'll be a few that break through the clutter for specific. I think ChatGPT solves a very specific need for you, right? You don't need to go to Google.
Yes.
It's quick, instant information, and it gives it to you in this shape, and it's concise too. It doesn't sort of make it
it
really
does the job for you.
Yeah.
Google never did a job for you. For example, if I need an email and if I want to check the grammatical effectiveness of an email, change the tone, write a copy, Google never did that for me. And that is my predominant use case with ChatGPT.
Right.
Of course, question and answer. But question and answer, it existed in some form or shape with Google itself. But ChatGPT does a few things for you. It's technically your assistant.
True, very true. Exactly, that's right. The right word. I think that's where the differentiation comes in.
Absolutely. When my idea is so rough, I just dump that, and it makes that idea better.
Yeah. Probably the next time I'm sending an invite to come on the podcast, I'm speaking to Deepan AI and figuring out schedules, but I do feel that's a possibility in the future for sure. I think personalized assistance for people would come in.
Yes.
No doubt about it. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be time is.
In fact,
one
I think
thing.
10 years back itself, people were talking about, okay, get me an appointment in the salon, right? Autonomous cars.
Yeah.
Right? All of this is form of personal.
Now it'll get branded, as your personal, and I think that's going to be the next. So probably agencies have some more role to play there in terms of that. What's next for you in terms of how you're looking at your career as a marketer?
At least for the next foreseeable future, I'm going to be in B2B SaaS. I've found my love and passion once again. I think I kind of rediscovered my passion and trigger with B2B SaaS, right? So I'm going to be with B2B SaaS at least for next 10 years. I have this different ambition which I've never discussed with anybody else. I want to get into politics at some point.
Oh wow, very interesting. Did not expect that at all.
Yeah, I really want to influence the education policies of the country. I've always been inclined towards that, because I know that the quality of education, if it was better, I would have made it much bigger than what I am today, right? And why should people not have access to quality education, right? And I really have that ambition of getting into politics at some point of time in my life. That's like a long-term goal. But immediate goal is like B2B SaaS. But I don't think I've never, like you, Sanand, and I will never have the courage to start a business, run a business. That bit of entrepreneurship. Maybe that mindset is there within me, but I don't have the courage to run a business. So I think I'll be a marketer forever till the time I retire. I'll probably write a few books. I'll launch a few more programs. I'm thinking of launching a few more programs. I'm trying to reduce my effort that goes into live workshop. I'm trying to focus more on my mental health these days.
Right.
right? So yeah, that's the immediate.
That's a very interesting thing. I can't. So I have to ask you about two things. One is politics. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's just too big a topic not to address. But I'm assuming at some point you'd go back home and then you'd
Yes.
start from there.
Yes.
That's just
That's
generally
the
the you have to start at grassroots.
Yeah.
You don't
I
have a choice.
I have a leader in mind.
Oh, right.
So that leader is likely to get into politics very soon, and I'm likely to join hands.
Oh, nice.
With that person. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. I'm not going to ask if it's going to be DMK or AIDMK.
Not either of them.
Oh wow. Okay. Very interesting. I'll look out for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's I think I keep telling people that more of educated people who have had experience of the world needs to go back into politics. I think I think that's again one. If I can call it an industry, it can really be disrupted with everything that we have in tech.
Yes.
And I think it's just they're I think far more working in the olden traditional ways than any organization in the world, right? At least my interactions with any government organization has shown me that they just rooted to the old ways of doing, and that can really be disrupted. So I think and that'll only happen at grassroots. It cannot be done by one leader on the top.
That's true.
It's never going to change. So yeah, whenever you do that, all the best. I'd be keeping an eye on.
Thank you.
Probably start with advertising and campaigning and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Then you probably segue into it.
That's my bread and butter.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
where I would start, right?
Yeah.
That's my contribution to whichever movement that I'm going to join.
Right.
From there, but the larger goal is to influence education.
Oh, great. Very noble.
Yeah.
On the mental health front, because I feel that's a very relevant conversation, given attention to, in the past probably not given attention to. And I think everyone has their own ways of dealing with it, because I just don't think it can be ever standardized, because it's a matter of human brain, right? And I don't think there's any human being in the world who does not need some form of escape from doing what they do.
Yeah.
So how do you look at it? For me, for example, I absolutely love football. So one of the reasons I told you I need to be somewhere by 7 is because my team's playing at 7:30,
Okay.
so I need to watch it. But that's just something that's been rooted to me since I'm a teenager of sort, and I try and play 3 days a week. I get that exercise, and I feel happier, better, helps me at work. There was a period maybe for a year and a half after starting Wirality where I didn't do any of that. I was very, I think I was a very bad marketer in that phase, right? And a business person. So what is your way of escape? How do you
Got it. So I
recharge?
think being with myself is the way that I found to escape from everything that's happening. For example, I've carved out mandatory time in a day for myself. I mean, it's very difficult. For example, when you live with a family, you're always surrounded by people, right? So every morning I go play badminton, 2 hours, mandatory. That is my escape from the world, first thing. But I've started utilizing every tiny bit of moment that I get with myself. For example, I take about 10 minutes to get to my badminton court. I love that 10 minutes. I just relish that, really enjoy that.
Do you walk there? Do you jog?
No, I go in a car.
Okay.
I love driving. I love driving alone. Hopefully my wife is not watching the podcast. So I love driving alone. And at these little moments, I've really found it to consciously spend that time with myself. I mean, that is a method that really worked for me. I don't like necessarily traveling alone, right? I like traveling with friends. I like spending more time with friends. But what I've ensured is to find out time for myself mandatorily every day. That has made a lot of difference. I mean, I don't think of the last time that I felt stressed. It's been a good 2 years I felt stressed. So which means every little thing that you're doing is working in some form or other. May not work for everybody, but this is a method that worked for me.
But interesting. So what, according to you, is the things that make you what stresses you out? Is it about work where you're not, hitting a certain target, or is for me, only time I ever feel stressed is if things are not moving as fast as I wanted to. Is the only time. But then it's momentary. I switch back. But I've just, as a person, I'm relatively laid back. So for me, no consequence really, gives me the feeling that this is the end. Maybe it's coming from the fact that I learned by bleeding. So I always feel if you don't bleed out, you have an opportunity.
Yeah.
But what stresses you out?
What stresses me, what could possibly stress me is, of course, I work for a very fast-moving company, really fast-paced. and I'm accountable for revenue, contributing to revenue, which means anything could go wrong at any time. Any screw up, any F/up should get happen. So work is one, but personally speaking, I mean, an argument could lead to more stress with your spouse, right? An argument with parents, because I live with my parents, could lead to more stress, right? And overthinking about my future, right? For example, comparisons. Irrespective of how much ever you tell yourself that you cannot compare yourself with others, but often you end up making those comparisons. But when you see somebody who's doing really well, and you suddenly start feeling that, okay, are you lacking? Are you slacking, right? Behind. That could lead to some form of stress. So I think there is enough number of opportunities in front of you for you to get stressed out. But I'm not letting any of this affect me. So earlier it used to affect me a lot, especially during agency time when I never had time for myself, and these things constantly used to run in the subconscious mind and bother me out. Now that I have a lot of time, I try asking this question to see, hey, can you do something about it? If you can't, then why stress about it? If you can do something about it, do something about it. If you can't, then why are you overthinking about it? Why stressing? I've started asking these questions to myself because I carved out that time.
Right.
If you are always surrounded with people, you possibly are not questioning yourself.
Right. Fair. Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I think I've sort of covered more or less everything else that there is. Great. Deepan, thanks a lot for coming down. I know you had, again, like I said, I only learned what was the other thing that you had planned. So I feel if thank God it all worked out. If not, I would have felt very guilty bringing you down.
Not at all. I love being here. Very nice conversation.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like very less performance marketing questions.
Yeah, I think I wanted to. I know for a fact that anywhere you go, people will hound you with more performance marketing. I think that's just an aspect of work.
There's more to personal. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I think there's more to a marketer. Like I said in the beginning, right? I feel who you are, your skills at work is a reflection of what experiences you've had. And there's this great quote, funny enough, from Conan O'Brien, who's a comedian, but he said this at one of those, say, valedictory speeches. He said, who you try to be and you fail at it is what eventually you become. So you're a product of your perceived idol, but it's not what it is, right? So I feel as a marketer, as much information and experiences you've had, it just makes you better at work. So I wanted to sort of dig deep into that. And I think I have not, and whenever we have met, we have always had conversations that are very centric to work. So I wanted to mix that up. But I think we got that. But yeah, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do so? Are you someone who's open to it? Can someone send you a email and ask you for
Email is not the best medium. Right. LinkedIn is the best channel. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. So best channel to catch hold of me is LinkedIn. But sometimes what happens, LinkedIn is crowded with messages. Right. So if you want to get my attention, come to my Twitter. I don't get a lot of engagement there. So if you actually tweet me, you will probably have my attention.
Right. Great. So for people who want to touch base with Deepan regarding anything, I guess, in terms of career or advice with regards to marketing, or even want to discuss politics, I guess Deepan's the right person to go to. And great. Thanks a lot, Deepan, for your time. I'm hopefully made your trip to Indranagar worthwhile.
Absolutely. And congratulations on your podcast.
Oh,
so happy
thank you.
Finally doing this. I was not aware that the first podcast is with you.
Yeah, no. So we do the Wirality 101, which is more Q&A and stuff. But then I think we took a hard call this morning to say that let's break this into a different show in itself. These guys are very happy. They've been trying to convince me for 1 week. I think Joel has thrown at me the need for Apple podcast SEO. So you know how you need to term and how you should have it. So anyway, so I think now they're happy. It's no longer clubbed under what it was, and it'll be something new. But yeah, I think I'm trying to do this one every week. And Saturdays are great.
There's no office. I think you're a great host. You do it really
thank
well.
you.
I'm hoping to see you in my
Explore feed, yeah. Let's see. There, if I need some paid media help, I'll come to you.
Of course.
I'm trying to do it without the team's help here. Yeah. So I've just, it's kind of a personal challenge I've taken on, saying I need to run my own ads, or else, I'm also losing touch with platform. So that's probably the reason.
Cool.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thanks a lot.